Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Hey guys, I am so pumped that I have the absolute pleasure of getting to have Leanne Vogel back on the Fast Keto podcast again today. If you are in the keto space, I have no doubt that you're well aware of who Leanne is. She is a keto podcaster, author, blogger, and she has been also a YouTuber for many, many years, talking and blogging and spreading knowledge and information about the ketogenic diet as a trained nutritionist. And she is a keto nutritionist, which is so cool. She shares a lot about her own journey going through keto, finding keto herself, and why she found it in a lot of her blogs and posts and her program. And she also works with quite a few women on helping them to get into ketosis, to test their hormones, to find out how to optimize their health. And I'm so thrilled to have Leanne joining us again on the show today and to go a little bit more in depth today on certain topics like fasting, time-restricted eating, how she practices keto for herself, and how her keto has evolved over the years from when she first started. So I hope that you enjoy today's episode with Leanne Vogel. If you haven't checked out my cookbook yet, it is called Keto Essentials on Amazon, and it is currently 42% off on Amazon. It has over 150 of my favorite keto recipes, all of the most delicious comfort foods that I have made into keto treats, everything from fettuccine alfredo, keto pad thai, my spinach and artichoke dip, cheesecake, brownies, decadent, delicious, healing, and healthy recipes to get you started on keto. And I make them all super simple. All the ingredients you can find at any supermarket. I don't use a lot of hard to find ingredients. I like to be able to make these recipes at using ingredients from any supermarket, any grocery store. And there are a few keto products in there that you might want to try at some point, like those weird noodles. But you know what? You can make all keto foods and recipes from my book without having to get any rare and hard to find ingredients. It is called Keto Essentials. It's on Amazon for 42% off. Go and get yourself a copy and get a copy for everyone you know, because hey, keto is amazing and you know it is. So go check it out, and hope you enjoyed today's episode. A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risks or that are incompatible with the ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown. So you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian. Hey, Leanne, thanks so much for being back on the podcast again today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Vanessa.
So you are coming to us from a hotel room today?
Yep, as always. I feel like I live in a hotel room. Yeah, hotel room. Yes, it's happening.
You've had a bigger dose of hotel rooms recently than usual.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just got back from a tour, which was 3.5 weeks for a book tour. And then our Jeep broke down and I had to stay in a hotel while it got fixed because my husband was driving across the country with our home, which we live in an RV. And so I was in a hotel there. And then I got home to the RV, and recording podcasts in an RV is like really challenging. So I just rent a hotel room. So now I'm back in a hotel for 3 days. So hotel life, I'm getting all the points. So maybe one day I'll own the Marriott. I don't know.
Just buy them out from all your stays. That's awesome. Why not? Where are you headed to after the 3 days when you're done all your recordings?
Well, our RV is broken, so we're going to be staying in Coburg, Oregon for quite some time unless the part comes early. We were planning on going to Yosemite this summer, so we're hoping we can still do that. And then we're just going to make our way down to New Mexico, Arizona, where we'll be parked for the winter. We'll be staying in those two states kind of for the winter and hanging out. So I can't believe we're already talking about winter, but it's just like when you're driving, it just takes longer and you have to think, where do we want to be in September?
I know. I've been resisting making plans for the fall and winter, because then you kind of project yourself there and you're living more and more there. And today I've been making plans all day. My husband and his dad every year do a father-son trip to Moab in Utah. And I have been hearing about it and seeing photos for the last 10 years. And finally, I'm going with them. This time, I'm going to fly from Las Vegas in September, meet them in Grand Junction. We're going to drive to Moab and just do like arches and all their favorite like hikes and the slot canyons and stuff. And I'm so excited. And I'm like, I don't want to project myself there, but I'm so excited and I can't wait for it to come. But I have to remember to stay present and, it's summertime, like enjoy the summer. It's such a nice time too, because things kind of slow down a bit. People are on a holiday. It's just nice to have a little bit of a break in that feeling. So I totally get what you're saying about that. And thinking about winter, oh my gosh, it's coming. But yeah, we got to enjoy the moment. Your next trips, though, sound fantastic. So I know you're on the road all the time. And one thing that occurred to me today, I was like, I wonder what homemade keto recipes Leanne loves to make and how you kind of make that work being in an RV. Do you have favorite keto recipes that you like to make homemade, and how do you do that when you're on the road so much?
Yeah. So the first part is like grocery shopping. And I find that the easiest place to get groceries is at local markets. If we're in a place for a longer period of time, I'll see if there's any butchers or farms in the area that sell grass-fed, grass-finished beef, because it's so much easier than shipping beef and making sure that quality is good. And that also pertains to like chicken and fish and all the things. And so I'll do markets and ranchers and butchers and Costco. Now, the reason I put Costco last is because their packaging is really starting to get to me lately. Like the amount of plastic and cardboard and extra things that they have on their products is just, it drives me nuts. And, when you live in an RV and sometimes you're not near a garbage, and especially in the States, I've found that the recycling programs for the public are pretty non-existent. We're in Oregon right now, where a site quite close to where we are, where we can drop off all of our recycling, which is really great. But in most states, there isn't anything for public use. So sometimes I'll actually ask Healthful Pursuit listeners and the community if they have a blue box I could just drop off my recycling in. And I've done that quite a few times, actually. So there's that piece of just making sure that we are trying to be as little waste as possible. And we're choosing fresh ingredients because we're on the road so much and we have a very small pantry. There's not a lot of extra stuff. Our pantry is about, 3 feet by 2 feet wide. So that's mostly all of my perfect keto stuff, like my keto collagen and my exogenous ketones and coconut milk powder and those things. So for us, it's really a matter of just like fresh vegetables, some sort of meat, and some sort of oil. We have coconut oil, cacao butter, olive oil, and avocado oil in the house. The hardest thing to find is animal-based fats in local areas. Generally, I'll order those from Thrive Market or something like that. And then when you prepare your food in an RV and you're not plugged into a power source, for us, we use solar power. And so if you're cooking at night, that's not going to work because there's no sun. So oftentimes I'm cooking through the day, where I'm using the Instant Pot a lot because it's a renewable energy source. I mean, look at me. Even a year ago, I never would have said these things like packaging and renewable energy source. But, when you live in an RV, you become so much more conscious to the world around you and how much water you're using and power. And so I try to use the Instant Pot more than our propane or the generator, which will generate electricity, but it uses diesel. So trying to use a renewable energy source like solar with the Instant Pot, I end up making a lot of roasts and shredded meats, a lot of ground beef, and then I'll usually just add a vegetable to that. And if I want to make it a soup, I'll add broth. If I just want to make it dry, I'll leave it with just a vegetable and a meat. We do a lot of like fatty coffees, and instead of using a blender, which is also power, I just put everything in my stainless steel Yeti mug. It's like a water bottle. And I put all the powders in. So even the way that I'm making my fatty coffee has changed. I don't use liquid or solid ingredients, which require blending. I use powders, which just require shaking. So all these little things, and we eat a lot of nuts and seeds. I don't eat a ton of them, but my husband does. I make a bunch of like jerkies. We can make jerkies quite easily in the RV. I make these things called meat cookies, and they're basically like ground beef shaped into cookies and cooked for a long period of time at a low temperature. So they're like jerky, but ground beef, so they're less expensive than using steak for your jerky. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I do to feed us.
You know what's so funny? My husband doesn't like nuts. And I'm like, you could eat nuts all day long for the rest of your life and you would be thriving and you wouldn't put on any excess weight and you don't like them? Like, what is not to like about nuts? I don't understand. It's just some kind of like ironic, terribly tragic, ironic thing that he doesn't like nuts because they're so good for you. They're so nutritious. And sometimes he'll get hangry if he doesn't eat. And I'm like, if you just like nuts, like have some nuts. They're such a balanced food. But yeah, I don't understand. That's great that you guys utilize so many of those things. And it sounds like you've really found a great way to make keto work for you, despite the fact that you're traveling all the time. What are some of your meal prepping tips for people who maybe aren't in an RV?
Oh, yeah. I would say I really love, and this goes for anyone. This is a tool that I've used for many, many moons. And that is that I love making sure that I always have protein cooked and ready to go. That's like when I don't have protein cooked and ready to go, I always make poor nutrition choices. Like if all of the ground beef in our house is frozen and I'm hungry, I'm not going to wait for it to defrost. And I'm not also going to cook it. I'm just going to grab a bag of like jerky and eat that instead. And I've really been trying to get out of that habit because it can happen when you're really, really busy and then you forget and then you're just like, screw it, I'll just have a bag of jerky and that can go on for months. And so I think having meat prepped, I love making big roasts in the Instapot, shredding it up or cooking like 4 pounds of ground beef all in one go. Balls. I always make big batches of bacon when I make it. That way it's like in the fridge and ready to eat. My husband like loves that, but he almost like eats too much of it. Like if I make a bunch of bacon and I tell him about it, he'll eat all of the bacon, like, I don't know, 50 strips in one day. And that really makes me angry because then I don't get any. I always have some sort of soaked nut or seed in the fridge. See, now I have the opposite problem. My husband will eat an entire Costco bag of nuts in one day. And that's like not great. The omega-6 in nuts is actually pretty high in most nuts. So they're a good snack, but if you're eating a whole bag, it's not a great idea. So instead I soak them and I'll use them in recipes like pâtés or just grind them up and add them in sauces and that sort of thing. So we try to keep it like that instead of like, here, have a entire Costco bag size of nuts. And like for vegetables, even though when I was studying nutrition, I remember my teacher being like, never do this, but I do it anyways because it's way easier. When we buy vegetables, I usually prep them all ahead of time. So I'll wash them, I'll cut them, I'll put them in our glass Tupperware containers and just put them in the fridge. That way, when we're hungry or we want to make something, it's just like ready. And for us, it's a matter of like, sometimes we just don't have a lot of water. So if we're connected to water and I can wash everything before we're not connected to water, then that's at least a gallon of water a day that I'm saving not washing it because we have limited water too. So all those little tricks, like when you got the power, you cook all the things and then you put them all in the freezer and the fridge so that you have it available. And I think that's great for anyone. I've started getting into the habit of making like full meals or like raw ingredients and putting them in Ziplocs and throwing them in freezer. So when I want to make a roast or something, everything's in that bag ready to go and I just drop it in, turn on the power and go. So
that's awesome. And those are some great tips because everyone, we all have such busy lifestyles and, in order to make keto work for yourself, because there's so much cooking involved, I think that's such a big obstacle for people who are like, I just don't eat that way anymore. I don't really cook that much. I eat out all the time. I eat out a lot. And it's great that there are some options to be able to do that too, but you want to be able to cook for yourself and cook more at home if you're going to do the diet and do it long term or do this lifestyle long term. So those are some great tips and hacks. Now, I want to ask you personally, how has your keto diet evolved from, say, when you first started, how you were doing keto and what a day looked like for you, and what does it evolve to now? I mean, you've learned so much. You've interviewed so many incredible people on your show. You've written a book. What are the big fundamental shifts or evolutions you've made in your keto lifestyle?
Probably the biggest shift, like the biggest is not counting my macros anymore. When I first started keto, I was like all about macros. And now I just set the intention to eat low carb, high fat. And I've been doing that for over 3 years and it's working out just fine. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then the second would be incorporating carbs into my keto. So, the first 6 months of eating keto was actually really challenging for me. I had a lot of issues pop up, even though I was losing weight and looked great. It wasn't working well for me. So I would say the second one is eating carbs intermittently. And it doesn't get myself out of ketosis. I just eat some carbs and then the next day I'm back in keto. It's kind of a joke. In fact, we were out at lunch at KetoCon with Sean Miner, and we were both eating carbs for lunch and just thought it was hilarious that we could eat carbs and be back into ketosis in a couple of hours. So I really like having that freedom. So those are probably the two major shifts that completely changed my ability to do keto long term and also actually enjoy my life.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that lunch. It was so much fun. I'm like, it's taking me back to the moment. I love that you guys have been doing this for so long and that you both kind of have a carb up practice and that you found it to be really helpful, especially for your hormones, right?
Massively for the hormones. When I started incorporating carb ups, which is what I call them, I don't even know where the carb up thing came from. It was just like, you're carbing up. I don't know. Like, it's just what I called it from the very beginning. And so after that 6-month process of me becoming fat adapted, when I started eating carbs, I was actually able to get my period back, and it had been missing for 8 years. So I started calling it the fat fueled protocol, which has a bunch of other components to it, including not forcing yourself to fast, eating enough, and having those carbs, and also paying attention to the food quality of your ketogenic diet, because that wasn't a huge component of my original ketogenic approach. So yeah, by having those carb ups, you're allowing your inactive thyroid hormones to convert into active thyroid hormones. You're boosting up your serotonin, well, your tryptophan, which increases serotonin, which makes you happy and you sleep better. And then in the case of hormones, you're helping hormones also, rather, because your thyroid is also a hormone. But when it comes to your leptin, it actually, by having those carbs in the evening, you're resetting your leptin, which actually helps you fast naturally longer and helps you feel satiated from the foods that you're eating. So it's nice to know that you can use carbs to your benefit. And by eating this way, I was able to boost my estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, increase my cortisol. And when I say increase, it's really balance. For me, my levels were really, really, really low, but I've also seen women excel at using carb ups and more of a cyclical ketogenic practice, whether that be with protein or carbohydrate, to get their hormones back in line to where they should be or need to be for optimal health.
Now, do you usually recommend to women that they do carb ups at the beginning or later on when they're more keto adapted?
That's a really awesome question because it really depends on where they're coming from. So if a woman comes to me with, say, fibromyalgia, and she's like, I want to start the ketogenic diet, but I have a really hard time with life. I'm mostly bedridden. I have a hard time. I'm just getting out of bed. There's lots of pain, or I'm dealing with a lot of issues. Then I would say, the ketogenic practice, like the ketogenic diet itself and adapting, might be really hard on a body that's already struggling. So for them, I would say eating keto all day and then having some carbs in the evening is probably your best approach. And you will become fat adapted. It'll just take longer. Like if you look at some of the paleo leaders in the space, they're pretty fat adapted, even though they eat carbs, because they've been eating relatively low carb, like anywhere between 100 to 150 grams a day. If they were to go keto, it'd be very easy for them to get in a ketogenic state because they've already done so much healing in that space. So you can become fat adapted. And once you're fat adapted, maybe you lower out the carbs and you start going longer periods of time without carbs. So you are adapting, it's just taking longer. Whereas if somebody comes to me, they're in their mid 30s, or perhaps they've gone through menopause, two very opposite spaces, you can at least go through the process of becoming fat adapted. Now, as you know, Vanessa, I mean, it can take people 10 days, it can take 3 months. So it really depends on your metabolic state when you start keto, when you can incorporate those carb ups. But a really good indication that you're in ketosis is to, of course, measure your blood glucose as well as your ketones. And if you don't want to do that, you can kind of go off how you feel. And then once you know you're in ketosis, you're fat adapted, you're using fat as fuel, then you can play around with carb ups. And some people do better with carb ups than others, like that menopausal woman. She would probably, or postmenopausal, or even through menopause, she would probably do better with less carb ups. In fact, preferably not a lot of them. Whereas somebody, say, in their most fertile years, like 20 mid up to mid 30s, they can do carb ups all the time and it's not really going to affect anything. But it really, really comes down to what's your metabolic state and also what's your health condition and how are we going to go through that process of adaptation.
So you basically have every day your carbs at about how much, and then how much do you increase it is it a couple of weeks you do like a carb up?
Yeah, that's awesome. So it really depends. If you're new to this whole carb up theory and you want to give it a try and you've been eating keto for a little while, let's say at least 2 weeks, my recommendation for people first is to know what a carb up is. So I'm not saying pound a bunch of donuts or cupcakes or popcorn. I'm saying in your evening meal once a week, take out most of the fat from your meal. So most of the fat, meaning like everything but 2 teaspoons of oil or whatever, around 2 teaspoons, and replace it with carbs. So my go-to carb up when I don't need to think is broccoli with a little bit of coconut oil, a sweet potato, and a chicken breast. And yeah, sure, I'm going to cook that chicken breast with a little bit of fat, but I'm not going to go like crazy keto fat. I'm not going to wrap it in bacon and then drizzle everything with butter or hollandaise sauce. So you're keeping it relatively low fat, moderate carb, and moderate protein. So you would do this, generally speaking, once a week just to see how it goes for you. What you should expect on the day after is that you're going to go a longer period of time without eating. You're probably going to be less hungry the next morning. You're probably going to bust through a weight plateau if you eat enough carbs. So a good place to start is always start small because you don't know how your body's going to react. And it's better to start small and work your way up than go big and then not feel so awesome. So I always say to start with 1/4 gram of carbs for every 1 pound that you weigh. So if you weigh, I'm going to make it really easy on my brain, 100 pounds, then you would eat 25 grams of carbs in that carb up. So you're ignoring the rest of the day. You're keeping your keto macros where they are for breakfast, lunch, beginning of the day. And then at dinner time, whenever you have dinner, you're eating those 25 grams of carbs with a low fat protein option and some sort of vegetable that's also lower in fat. So you're not drizzling with fat, like I said. And then if you feel pretty good the next day or you don't notice anything, you're like, well, that was silly. Then the next time you do it, do 1/2 gram for every 1 pound that you weigh. So that would be 50 grams if you're 100 pounds. And then the next time you could try 3/4 gram for every 1 pound that you weigh. So that would be 75 grams. And then if you're still not feeling anything and you really want to get crazy, you could do 1 gram of carb for every 1 pound. For every 1 pound that you weigh. So if you weigh 100 pounds, that would be 100 grams of carbs for your carb up. So you can kind of like go up from that. And as women, you may find that you respond better to carb ups at certain times of your cycle. So if you know when you ovulate, you know that estrogen is driven down by carbohydrates or insulin. So by having carbohydrates at the time that you want your estrogen to dip down lower so your progesterone can increase, the best time to have your carbs might be when you're ovulating. I find that the best time for me is about 3 days before my cycle starts. You know, the first day of my period. So day 24, 25, 26 usually of my cycle, I have carb ups each night. And those are kind of like the times that I have it. And it just helps me have a better cycle. And other times I find it's better to do it during ovulation. So it really depends on your body and where your cycle's at and how your hormones are responding.
So do you fundamentally believe that maybe women need higher amounts of carbohydrate in their diet on a regular basis than being really strict keto?
I think it so depends on your body. Like,
Right.
I mean, you, for example, you have a completely different body than me and you can handle, like, you've done carnivore. There's no way. I mean, never say never, but like in this current body that I'm in right now in this space, there is no way that I could do that and feel okay.
Mhm.
So we're just so different. So for me to say, yes, 100%, I believe that women respond better to carbs. It's not really fair to
Yeah.
say. I mean, the research definitely supports it a tiny bit, but I mean, the research also supports that we should all be vegan and we should all drink 4 cups of milk a day. And so we kind of just have to understand that our bodies are so unique. And the best way to find out if it works for you is to try it. And if it doesn't work, then you know it doesn't work for you.
Exactly.
And even though it doesn't work now, it doesn't mean that it might not work later. So just put it in your toolkit. When you're feeling a little bit off, try it again. Did it work? No? Okay, put it back in your toolkit. So I think the conversation we had yesterday on my podcast was like, you know, you've tried this new thing, this carnivore thing, and you're like, so I'm going to incorporate all these different pieces and bring it back to my keto. And that's what it's all about, is just learning and incorporating and changing and adjusting.
Exactly. I've been learning so much from doing carnivore, and that for me is going to look like bumping up the protein more, keeping the carbs a little bit lower than I was before, and trying that out. And for me, it's just an ever evolving thing. I'm learning all the time, trying new things all the time, but I've also kind of zeroed in on what like generally works for me. For me, it's definitely going to be keto and not so much carnivore, but I do like what I've learned from trying it. Like you said, it's so great to just try different things. I actually had one woman on my program who had hit a stall, and she messaged me and she said that after listening to you, she tried a carb up and she broke through her stall. And I thought that was really, really cool. And she was really pumped about it too. So why do you think that in some cases the carb up will help some women break through a stall?
Yeah. So the best way I know how to explain it is if you've ever heard of a whoosh, where you eat all the foods and then you get stuck at this weight plateau and you're stuck at this weight plateau. It can go on for weeks. And all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're down 10 pounds and you're like, what the heck just happened? How do I repeat that 10 times? But so what's happening there with a carb up is for every 1 gram of carb that you eat, you need 4 grams of water to process that carbohydrate. So by having a carb up where you're ingesting these carbs, which turns into glucose in your body and stored as glycogen, in order to process that into glucose and have that used in the body, it needs 4 grams of water. And when you are losing weight, each fat cell doesn't like to be all shrinkly, like all wrinkly, like it doesn't like being shrunken down. So when the fat leaves the fat cells, it'll bring in water to keep it tight and full. And so when you've just had these carbs and it needs water, and in a ketogenic state, you have less water in your body, the main water source when you're losing weight on keto is in those fat cells. And so the water comes out of the fat cells, attaches to the glucose molecule, and then is then used as fuel. And so that's why a carb up can encourage weight loss, and really it's water loss, generally speaking, because it's taking the water out of those fat cells, using it to process the glucose, and then you experience a whoosh. And if it's a true whoosh, it's probably going to take a day or so after the carb up to realize it. So don't like have a carb up and an hour later sit on the scale or stand on the scale and be like, well, why didn't this work? It's going to take 36 hours for the glucose to be used. A high intensity interval training session will definitely do that. So like working out pretty hard, high intensity for 15 minutes, having a carb up, next morning, go about your business, eat keto that night, do another high intensity interval training, and probably the following morning, you'll experience a whoosh.
Hey guys, just taking a really quick break to talk about the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. If you're interested in doing a ketogenic diet for yourself, it's a great place to start. I teach you everything about how to follow a keto diet to get yourself into nutritional ketosis, and it includes 28 days of meal plans. It comes with weekly shopping lists, how to interpret results, how to test yourself, a complete guide to getting started on keto. If you've been keto for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want to in terms of your health or fat loss, or you are brand new to keto, the 28-day challenge is a great option because it also comes with my free coaching and support in our members Facebook group. And you can post any questions that you have about the meal plans, about keto, and I am there supporting you. We have an amazing community in our group. I like to call it the happiest place on earth because everybody in there is so excited about following keto, about having found something that really works well for them. And everyone in there is just so kind, caring, generous, and supportive. And it's a really fun place to be and hang out. So if you'd like more info on it, you can find it at ketogenicgirl.com. And it's the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And now back to our interview. That's so cool. And I love that there's so many different tools like this, so many different, mechanisms that we can have in our keto tool belt and try all of these different things. Now, for you personally, yesterday we were talking a lot about fasting and how I incorporate fasting into my day with a daily eating window and time restricted eating. And I talked about how Pete and I are doing the early bird special and getting all these massive bonuses like cheaper meals, not having to make reservations, going to restaurants at 4:30. There's no one there. It's awesome. I love it. And then it also aligns me more with my circadian rhythm. So I'm really enjoying playing with that. How do you incorporate any fasting into your keto lifestyle?
Yeah, I love that you're doing that. It's so fun. Well, my fasting, like we talked about, my relationship with fasting definitely changed. Like when I started eating keto, and I'm pretty sure this still exists, it's almost like this belief that when you're keto, you have to fast. Like it's just part of the territory. And so when I started keto, I would force myself to fast, even though I was hungry. And I think that I was doing right by my body. And now I just use fasting as one of those tools in my toolkit, like almost like a permission slip of like, if you're not hungry, don't eat. And if you're hungry, eat. And so there's some days where I have a full breakfast, lunch, dinner, although breakfast, lunch, dinner is really rare. Like if I have breakfast, I'll probably have lunch and then maybe I'll have like a fatty drink and in the evening, but it's very rare that I'll have 3 meals. So sometimes I'm fasting at night, sometimes I'm fasting in the morning. I really like to just go with the flow and see what my body says, when I'm recording back to back to back, like I am today and yesterday and tomorrow, I don't really eat that much. I'm fasting throughout the day and I'll have like a big meal, but it's not nearly as much. And I was actually chatting with Megan Ramos yesterday about 1 meal a day and how that's not really considered fasting. And I thought that was so interesting. And of course it's not, because these people are quote unquote fasting for 24 hours, but then they're just eating 1 meal every day. But that's calorie restriction. And it's been shown that calorie restriction will only slow down our metabolism. She was actually telling me about a patient that she had that had 400 calorie resting metabolic rate because of calorie restriction. So I've definitely never done the 1 meal a day multiple times a week, because I do understand that intermittent fasting means that when you're fasting, and when you're feasting, you're eating and you're not restricting calories. So I think we can get into a real big mess. And it's happened to me multiple times where I think that fasting means restricting, and that is not what it should be. The only way that intermittent fasting works and fasting works is because there are large feasting periods where you are eating and you're not restricting and you're eating to satiation. So I definitely do practice that. And it was just such a great conversation about 1 meal a day. And I don't support it personally. I don't see the benefit. So for me, it's just when I'm hungry and I'm eating to satiation. When I'm not, I don't. It just ends up being, sometimes it's a 12-hour fast and sometimes it's 24 hours, but I don't go long periods of time without eating and also restricting at the same time.
And do you do any fasting once or twice a year? It's an extended fast for the benefits of autophagy or, kind of a cellular cleansing, that kind of thing?
Such a great question. So my history, I struggled with anorexia and bulimia for many years. I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 8 years old. And so for me to play around with long period fasting, I just don't think I'm there yet. I have been eating disorder free for a couple of years. I think I don't like to put a year. I don't like to calculate out that stuff because it's huge. I don't want to say pressure, but I just don't like to know. I know that I'm eating disorder free. It's been a couple of years. I feel great. And I don't want to play around with something like that just yet. I think that there's a huge benefit to it. But I think if you have a history of disordered eating and a blistered relationship with food, even though the last couple of years have been really good, I know that fasting will trigger me right now. And I'm just not ready for that. Although I see a major benefit to it, I personally don't plan on doing it for a while yet. But I think if I didn't have that history, 100% I would do that. I think it's so great. My husband does it. He feels great on it. I just think that might trigger something in me that I'm just not ready to do yet.
Right. And it's so important for you to know that. And I know Megan recommends to people all the time, if you have any kind of history with, disordered eating, that fasting, extended fasting, prolonged fasting is not a good idea. And her and Dr. Fung, they make a big point of that in their books and all their podcasts and work that they put out there. And it's really more extended fasting, prolonged fasting as an intervention for people who have quite a bit of obesity, type 2 diabetes, are facing potential amputations and have, they're really on a crash course. Those are kind of more recommended. But I know there are some, like Dr. Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute, he does once a year, twice a year, like a 5-day fast for autophagy. And a lot of people are able to incorporate that into their like sort of annual regimen. But it's such a great point that you bring up. And that's also why I believe that there's so many benefits that can come from just not eating between your meals and just incorporating fasting so naturally. And keto is a fasting mimicking diet. We get so many of the benefits. It's now being shown that you get autophagy after only 12 hours, whereas before we thought it was like after 2-3 days of fasting. So you don't really have to do that if it's not something for you. And you can get a lot of the benefits from doing keto, from doing, just regular time restricted eating, from fasting in the day, a lot of the things that you do. So I love that you brought that up. Now, do you have any goals in terms of your keto lifestyle that you're working towards, like things that you want to shift or change, or what are you kind of excited about in terms of your keto lifestyle, and maybe some new things you've tried or you want to try?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I'm really not a goal-driven person. And I've discovered this lately that I'm not motivated by goals, or at least not the way that people, outline them. Like, I want to eat more grass-fed beef. Like, that's not motivating to me at all. But I go off feeling. I want to feel more freedom, or I want to feel more connection. And so what are things that I can do to make me feel that way? That's usually how I operate. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do more yoga because I want to feel more connected to my body. And so the goal is connecting to my body, not yoga. So that's an example. So for me, I would say one thing that I noticed, and I'm actually doing a little mini-sode on the Keto Diet podcast about, I'm recording it today, just about the fact that when I get really busy, I eat out of bags a lot. I am guilty of going on Thrive Market, ordering all of the keto things, and then living off of those packaged products for like weeks because I'm just too busy. And so for me, it's not about, most people, maybe your goal would be, I need to eat more fresh food. And for me, that's just not a motivator. And that's not a goal that I like. But a goal that I could have instead is I want to get more excited about foods in the area. And because that's coming from a place of connecting with locals. And so I don't want to eat bagged products, but my ultimate goal is to connect with people at markets. And so I'll go to markets and I'll, chat with farmers and get to know their story and how they raise this bok choy and they do to create the bok choy. And then all of a sudden I'm excited to make the bok choy, and I go home and I'm like, oh, look at me making fresh ingredients. But my goal was really connecting with those people. And so I think if you're one of those people I feel like everyone needs to be that sort of person, because goals are so lofty. And when they don't actually mean anything to you, there's really no point in trying to do them, because you're just not going to do them. And I see that every day of I tried keto and, I made it until lunchtime and then I had a sandwich. What's wrong with me? And it's like, well, why did you start keto? And then they say, well, because my friend said it was cool. Okay. So why are you eating keto? Well, my friends had a lot of success. And okay, but what kind of success has your friend had? And it turns out that this woman started keto because her friend lost 60 pounds and she just had her first grandbaby, and she's able to help her daughter take care of this new grandchild. And she has the energy and vitality to do that. Okay, so this woman who just started keto, what did you like about that story? Well, I have a 7-year-old son and I just can't play baseball with him. Okay, so you want to play baseball with your son. It's not about really the ketogenic diet and how good or bad, quote unquote, you are with it, but it's like you want to play baseball with your son and you want to throw that baseball and feel strong. And so that is your reason. And so I think with all this diet stuff, we get so caught up in the good foods, the bad foods, and the stuff we want to do with our ketogenic diet and where we want to go, instead of where do we want our life to go and how can keto support that and what do we want out of our life? And so I've tried to shift that lately of it just doesn't work for me if I say I'm just not going to go to Thrive Market and buy all of the bagged foods. It just doesn't work. I'll do it and then I'll eat all of them. But if I say I want to go to the market and connect with people, that gets me really excited. And so for me, I guess to answer your question, my goal over the next year is to become a lot more connected to people. And so that kind of supports all of those things.
That's so beautiful. I love the way that you put that in connecting with people and also just the feeling that you want to experience, and talking about that woman and her why, because the why is what's going to not only get you started, but carry you through, gaining health and doing all of this stuff. Now, I know you just did a podcast on grass-fed and grass-finished. Can you share with our listeners what your opinion is on that? Maybe why it's important and if it's needed or not?
Yeah. Okay. So a year ago, I would have said you need to eat high quality protein in order to live a healthy life. And while I understand and appreciate that grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised chicken and even heritage pork and all of those things are really, really great, they're very inaccessible to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people out there, maybe some people listening, just don't have access to this or don't have the money to buy these things. Like, especially in the US, I mean, I've paid $17 for a pound of grass-fed, grass-finished beef. That is insane to me. Like, that is US. That's like $23 Canadian at least.
Right.
And so that's not acceptable. And so I think if the only thing that's stopping you from living your best life is the fact that you can't order from places like ButcherBox or find a grass-fed, grass-finished butcher, please don't let that stop you from eating keto or feeling like you have a good, rounded, holistic, ketogenic eating style. I do have concerns over the way that livestock is treated conventionally, and that's generally why I go for more local beef or local chicken, the heritage pork, and I like to chat with the ranchers that raise this cattle and know that they're taken care of. As post-vegan, I was vegan for many, many years, and the treatment of animals really gets to me, and so I like to support locally raised livestock more so than going to Costco and getting all the meat. Although sometimes when you're in Alabama, there's not really many options. It's 3 hours to a grocery store in any direction where we were staying. And so you have to make do with what you have. But when I can, for ethical reasons, I like to choose the best animal sources that I can. But from a health perspective, I mean, studies show that grass-fed, grass-finished beef, for instance, is much higher in nutrients. Now, if you go to Canada and you have grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and then you go to the US and have grass-fed, grass-finished beef, I personally, in all the states that we've been to so far, have not been able to find a high-quality product like I have been in Canada. In Canada, I used a ranch called TK Ranch. It's based in Alberta. They ship all over Alberta and they have meetup spots. I've even driven like 6 hours to meet up with them to get my protein. And when you cook their beef, the fats that come from it are bright yellow. And the CLA and just like bright yellow. I haven't been able to find that in the US. So you're also working against what's available to you. But if you can, I would say grass-fed, grass-finished. Just don't succumb to but it's organic. That organic means nothing for me. Like, don't bother, save your money, just get the conventionally raised stuff. And people can say a lot of things on packaging without it being true. So if you're spending $17 on grass-fed, grass-finished beef per pound, make sure that it's actually grass-fed, grass-finished, because they can lie on the packaging, and it's really unfortunate.
That's awesome. And people can also go listen to the full episode that you did, I think, all about that. They want to hear more about it. I know I will be. And I just want to wrap things up by asking you some rapid fire questions. What is your favorite keto food?
Coconut butter.
Salad or steak?
Salad.
Fasting or no fasting?
Fasting.
Testing or no testing?
Testing.
Carb ups or no carb ups?
Carb ups.
Supplements or no supplements?
Supplements if you can afford it, but no supplements is fine too, I guess.
Advocate or silent follower? I mean, this one I could probably skip for you because we all know how much an advocate you are for keto, and you're definitely not just like keeping quiet about it.
Oh, I'm not keeping quiet. People hate me.
No. Yeah.
Advocate.
Big time. Well, we just answered this one, grass-fed or grain-fed.
Yeah, grass-fed.
Rare, medium rare, or well done?
Oh, well done. Oh.
Well done. Yeah, do you find that because of being a former vegetarian and vegan, for me, I struggle with the more rare stuff still.
If I'm cooking, I cook it all the way. If I'm going to like a really good steakhouse and I know that they know how to cook stuff, I mean, I've eaten rare pork and beef and even chicken that's like not fully cooked, and I'm fine with it. I don't recommend that you eat chicken that's not fully cooked. That was a mistake that I made. People are starting to like not cook pork fully, and that kind of creeps me out. I didn't totally love that, but if I go to like a good steakhouse, I mean, I do steak in your rapid fire because I don't know how to cook steak right, so I would rather make a salad.
Right. I get that. Yeah. Fried, baked, steamed, or grilled?
Fried.
Possibility of eating high carb again in the future, possible or never?
Oh, never say never. Possible.
Keto for life or for a few more years?
I can't answer that question. What if I get like, I don't know. I mean, keto for life if my body allows it, but you never know what your body's going to do.
I know. I totally get that. Now, you recently made some big changes and started a Patreon account. So tell us what you're excited about with that. I think it's so great that you launched it, and tell us kind of a little update on it.
Yeah. So I had this crazy idea of dropping sponsors for everything Healthful Pursuit, almost like a cleanse of just like, I need to get rid of everything so that I can assess what's happening here. And I got a lot of feedback from people being like, there's just too many ads. I stopped following you because you just promote too many products. And I definitely didn't want me promoting products to stop people from finding information. But what I've learned is running the type of business that we have with the costs associated, like our hosting, our website is over $800 a month, and sending newsletters over $1,000 a month. So it adds up very quickly. And I'm the type of person that just goes with my gut feel. I have a really hard time like listening to an accountant that's like, this is a bad idea. And so I just wanted to do it so that I could, sometimes you just got to do crazy things to see if it'll work. And so by doing that, I realized, okay, wait, like I can't pay for stuff. So we started a Patreon page, and it's been pretty great. Will it be enough to sustain the business? Probably not at this point, but I think everything that's going on with Facebook right now, and people are like concerned about Facebook and the security of their information, all the things. And I was starting to notice that community aspect was missing. And there are large advocates in the Healthful Pursuit community, these women that share my book and my podcast, and they're telling everyone about the work that I do, and they're involved, and they're wanting to change the world with me. And by change the world, I don't mean like change the world, but just like change the keto space with me. And so I wanted to offer something for those people where, we created these gorgeous glam like phone wallpaper so you can add it to your lock screen, and we're going to have Q&As with me, and when I'm traveling I'll send you postcards and sign your book on all the pages and leave messages. And just for those people that are like with me, like those advocates that just want to support the work that I do. So we started that, and that will continue. I don't know what the future holds for sponsors and stuff, but I do know that I will never go back to that place. We had a lot of sponsors, and although I loved each and every single brand, it started like it was everywhere. It was on social media and the blog and the podcast, and it was just all over the place. You couldn't get away from it. So I think it was good to let it all go so that I could sit in this space and just figure it out. And I've definitely been given the space to soak it all in. I'm a rebel, so I love being like, I don't need this. We're an ad-free zone. And so I love that. I just don't know if it's sustainable long-term, which makes me really sad. As a consumer, I'm so sick of bloggers making these videos of like, look, I just made this recipe, and OPS, it has this really expensive supplement in it, and you just need to spend $200 and you can make this recipe too. And when I started getting sick of that, and it's something that I did, I was like, okay, well, I need to reassess things. And I think this is so important. Like it's like if I'm sick of it with other people, then that tells me something about what I'm doing. And so I think it's important to bend and flex, and that goes for anything. You don't have to run a business in order to know that sometimes things just don't work out as you planned, and you got to just like get rid of all of it and have a clean slate, and then figure out, what do I want? What do I want this to feel like? What do people need? In my case, it was just like, just drop it all, sit and marinate. I'm really good at marinating, so I'm just marinating. We're creating this Patreon community, and we're just going to see how it goes. So you can find more at healthfulpursuit.com/community. Regardless what happens, we're going to keep that going because it's so great. I really enjoy it.
I love what you've created, and you definitely have to go check out all the amazing bonuses and different levels of sponsorship that you can be in, because there's some cool things in there. Like, I would love to get a postcard from you from wherever you are in the world, or like a book full of positive notes on all the pages from you. I mean, it all sounds amazing. So people definitely have to go check that out. It's been such a pleasure having you back on the show again today, Leanne. I really, really appreciate you sharing so many great tips with our listeners, and everyone will be sure to go check out your Patreon page as well. So thanks so much for being here with us again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vanessa. And I should also say, I've even forgot, my program Happy Keto Body is launching in August. So if you guys go to happyketobody.com, you can learn more. Because I always forget to say that too. So there's that. Thanks for having me.
It's an awesome program. Everything that you do is with so much thought and care and love, and people definitely recognize that and feel that from you. And I just love everything that you're putting out there into the space so much. So yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you on again, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Vanessa.
All right. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Getting to chat with Leanne is always such a treat. She knows so much about keto, and in particular Carb Ups, and how they've been helpful not only in her keto lifestyle and her journey, but with so many of the women that she works with. And so I hope that you found delving into that topic a little bit more today was informative for you. And until the next episode, if you're interested in trying out the ketogenic diet, be sure to check out the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. It is all at ketogenicgirl.com. It includes 28 days of my meal plans, shopping lists, guides on how to test, how to interpret results, and it also comes with my support and coaching as a part of the program. You can check all of it out at ketogenicgirl.com. And if you like what you heard today, share the episode with a friend that you think might be interested in learning more about keto, about Carb Ups, about any of the topics that we discussed today, and be sure to leave me a rating or review. I absolutely love reading those, and hope that you have a fat-fueled rest of your day or week until the next episode. Bye for now.